It's another eBay tale. When is a bid not enough? There's a problem with filming the Sunday morning rant, Sunday afternoon, when the housemates are cooking. So today we're having roast lamb. Not that you need to know that, but we're having roast lamb. And the extractor fan is just outside the door, or where it comes out of the kitchen is just outside the door to the workshop. And all I can smell is the smells of a roast dinner being cooked, which is most disconcerting given I'm trying to concentrate on this. Anyway, this is Sunday after all. It's the Sunday morning rant. And we all know that buying equipment on eBay can be a bit of a lottery. There is always somebody trying to play an angle. And this week I've had quite another interesting experience, which is what I decided to do the rant about. The background is kind of as follows. Now, I have been looking for a Yamaha DX7 Mark II FD for quite some time now. In fact, I can probably say 6 or 7 years. Over the years, I've put bids in on various items, on various sales portals, and been trumped at the last moment, or the bidding has gone stratospheric and I'm not prepared to pay that much for the instrument. So the long and the short of it is I've not managed to acquire one of these fabled FD keyboards. Now, those that watch the channel will probably say, John, but you've already got a DX7. And I have. This is very true. I do actually own a DX7 Mark II, but I own the D version of the DX7 Mark II, which is actually nicely tucked away in its safe, warm storage location, because obviously I don't have space for it here, but I do have one of these. But the problem with the D version is it's not the FD, and the F of the FD version stands for floppy drive. And basically, if you have an FD, you have a 3.5 inch floppy drive, much the same as this T1 I've got behind me has a 3.5 inch floppy drive. The difference between the two, of course, is that the Yamaha DX7 is a 720 disc, or a double density, and this is a high density disc format, although this actually runs at 1.6 meg, not 1.44 meg, which is the sort of Microsoft PC format. Anyway, so going back to the story, why does me, John, want another DX7, or why do I want the FD? Well, I've wanted the FD for a long while, but it came a bit more imperative about 4 years ago, just before we went into the pandemic, when a friend of mine who was moving house at the time basically rang me up and said, I've got all these discs for a Yamaha DX7, and do you want them? So of course I said, yes, I do want them. Problem is, I haven't got a DX7 with a 3.5 inch floppy drive to be able to read them. Even worse than that, I haven't got a machine that's capable of reading them. So I have a way of duplicating and creating images of them, but I don't actually have, or I haven't invested the time. That's probably more the correct thing to say. I haven't invested the time to work out how do I get the sounds off the disc and into a SysX format that I can then load on the DX7 or into Dext or one of the other DX7 VST emulators. So that kind of then gave me another impetus to try and sort of source a DX7 Mark II FD. Now, there are DX7 Mark II FDs that come up listed quite often on especially eBay, but they do come up on Reverb as well. And those DX7 Mark IIs, if you look very carefully in the listing, even though they're listed in dollars, are actually being sourced from Japan. Now that means that the keyboard itself will come at 100 volts, and I always is very careful when I'm looking through the listings to see if there is, and most of the Japanese sellers are really good actually, because what they will do is they will put a picture of the the verification plate that sits on the back of the machine, just near to where the power supply goes into the DX7, and it will show 100 volts. These are frequently listed for about $800, plus roughly $100 to ship them from Japan to the UK. But I've always thought they are expensive. They claim to be mint. You obviously can only take the pictures. If it all goes a bit wrong, and it has gone wrong in the past, I had a piece of equipment, I can't think what it was now, it was a piece of Korg equipment which I bought from Japan, and I caught the vendor out. The actual piece of equipment never actually turned up in the UK, never cleared UK customs, but the vendor claimed it had, and I think it was just a ruse to be able to route it to somewhere else because somebody had outbid me. That's what I think had happened. But I ended up getting the money back for that, but it was a bit of a convoluted process. But if you buy something with 100 volts, you've either got one of two things you need to do. Number one, you need to step it down, so you need to take the European voltage, which is 230, 240 volts, and you need to step that down to 100 volts. You either do that with a step down transformer, which is effectively a brick that sits alongside, where you plug UK voltage in one side and it outputs 100 volts for your equipment, or you mod the equipment, which would be my preferred route of making that equipment, rather than 100 volts anymore, to be able to run on 240, 230 volts. And the reason why I prefer to do that is because it takes the cock-up factor out of when you go somewhere and somebody plugs 240 volts into a 100 volt supply, and it will merrily go fizz bang. Anyway, so now you know the background. Remember, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go over to Instagram and follow me there. Go over to Facebook, follow me there. That's where the normal notices are. And consider becoming a Patreon. I think I'm going down with a bit of a cough. So if I cough, I apologise, but when you're speaking a lot to camera, you quite often get to the point where you just have to cough. Anyway, so last week is when all this started happening. I said at the start of the week, but it was actually the week before, because I was actually away on business. As you know, I travel for business every now and then. And I was away on business, and all of a sudden I got an alert saying that this DX7 Mark II FD had been listed by a seller claiming to be in Halifax. And I know where Halifax is, but I still had to go and look it up. And for those that don't know where Halifax is, it's kind of sort of Leeds, Bradford, Halifax. It's kind of Yorkshire in terms of where it is in the UK. Anyway, the keyboard was listed as collection only, which was a bit of a pain. And the starting bid was £300. So I put in the starting bid, and I was immediately outbid. Okay, which I thought was a bit strange, but I was immediately outbid. So I thought this is going to be one of those strategic bidding processes where you have to work out how much you think the keyboard is worth to you, and then you have to strategically bid it. So that's kind of what I did. The listing was due to end in a couple of days, so I kind of diarised the sort of time when it was going to end, which was one evening last week. It might have been Sunday evening, actually. It might have been Sunday evening last week. Was when it was going to end. So I diarised that, put a little alarm in my phone, and then thought nothing about it until the phone went off. And then just before the bidding was due to end, what I then did was I then put in a £400 bid, because that was my maximum bid for what I think this is worth. And again, I was immediately outbid by somebody. So I thought, hey ho, another one lost. Chalk it up to experience. Then the story starts. So within an hour of the auction ended, I was contacted through the seller, or I was contacted by the seller, through one of my sales listings. At this point, I didn't think that was strange, but it was through one of my sales listings, not through the listing for the item being sold. Just bear that in mind. The message went very simply, are you still interested? The seller then tells me that the person who was bidding against me didn't have the money to pay for the synth. Something I thought was a little strange is you don't normally bid for something if you don't have, or if you can't afford to buy for it. I mean, yes, you can get caught up in the bidding frenzy, I suppose. But normally, if you go to bid for something, you kind of know what your maximum bid is. And if the bidding outbids you, like I said, 400 quid was my maximum bid, that's it. You don't go anymore. But I thought this was strange. But then I thought, or do people do this now? Is this the new norm, to try and then knock the seller down once the auction is finished? Hadn't looked at it that way, but maybe that's what people do nowadays. It's not something I would do. I've got quite a lot of integrity around this sort of stuff, but some people obviously don't give two hoots, and will try and any means they can to try and knock some more money off. So with this information on board, an exchange of messages happened. Ensuing trying to work out, how do I get said keyboard from Halifax to my storage location down on the south coast of England? Basically, at the end of this message, it looked like I was going to have to drive 5 hours up to Halifax and 5 hours back from Halifax to pick up this machine. Now, I know that when I lived in West London, and I used to go up to Yorkshire quite often because I had a client up in Yorkshire, that it would take me roughly 3 hours to get from West London round the M25, which is London's orbital car park, and then up the A1, M1 should I say, which is London's north-south car park as well. So I knew it was roughly about 3 hours, assuming traffic was good. Now, I know from where I am now to where my mum lives in West London is about an hour and 20 minutes. So if you add all that up, it's going to be about 5 hours with comfort breaks, etc., on the way up and the way down. This is not something, I have to be honest, I relished, but I have in the past when somebody has rung me up or somebody's gone into contact and said, do you want this piece of equipment? Rather than sort of say, well, if you sent it to me and they suffer the cost, or if it was a big piece of equipment and I can think of one piece of equipment that's just about to go back to storage, which is sitting over there, where I actually drove up to Scotland to pick that up. Now, that was a longest drive, so I planned to do that in two pieces. I drove up to Scotland on one day, spent the evening in a fairly nice hotel, had a fairly nice steak dinner, and then the next morning had a nice breakfast, went and picked the keyboard up and drove back. Now, I'm not adverse to doing that, so if somebody rings me up and says, I've got a piece of equipment, John, are you interested in having it, or are you interested in showcasing it on the channel? As long as they don't want it back tomorrow, then I'm quite happy to drive over to wherever it happens to be and pick it up. And as I say, I've driven up to Scotland. In fact, I go up to Scotland all the time with work, so I can actually drive back from Scotland if somebody actually made that offer. Anyway, that's a bit of digress. The seller then sends me a message. Once we've worked out all these logistics of how I'm going to get this keyboard to me, then he sends me, or I'm assuming it's to him actually, but then they send me this message say, how much do you want the DX7? Now this confused me a little bit because obviously I put a bid in, right? The bid was £400. So that kind of says, I want this DX7 to the tune of £400. So, after having spent all this time discussing the logistics, which probably took about an hour and a bit, bantering backwards and forwards, I then replied my maximum bid was £400. I then get an email or a message back saying, I can't let it go for much, they go for much more on eBay. I responded again, my maximum bid was £400, and I heard no more from him. I went, hey ho, again. The next day rolls along. And to be honest, I kind of, with some of this stuff, you sort of think about it and then you go, okay, whatever, and you move on. But the next day, the DX7, same photographs, went up for sale again with a starting bid of £350 this time round. The original had been £300. My initial £350 bid was once again immediately trumped with a bid of £360. I thought to myself, it was likely that the pickup would be a weekend job and possibly an overnight. So, like I described in the previous section, drive up, stay overnight, have breakfast, pick it up, drive back. So I was kind of thinking, actually, is £400 still my maximum bid, or is £360 my maximum bid? Anyway, at this point, I'm thinking something is not quite right with this listing. There was a user that was bidding me up, or a buyer that was bidding me up. I'm absolutely convinced of that. The original listing, I was almost outbid immediately, and again on this listing, supposedly I was the first bid at £350 and I was immediately outbid again. Anyway, I've been really quite busy this week with the day job because I've had a couple of deadlines that have had to be kind of met, and a bunch of all-day meetings on various bits and bobs. So I kind of just lost touch with it, and it happens sometimes. You just have a week where things just happen. So anyway, I didn't bid any further. The item reportedly sold for £360, and I thought, well, somebody's got a bargain. Somebody's got a good machine. Then, again, once the listing had finished, I get a message from the seller. Are you still interested? This time I responded my maximum bid was being £350. I get no response from the seller at this point. No, sorry, that wasn't right. That wasn't quite true. I did get a response. I'm looking at my notes, and I did get a response saying that they couldn't sell it for that, and then I got no further correspondence. That's correct. So I've tried to bid on this particular DX7 twice, been rebuffed twice, and been engaged twice to say, am I still interested? Then we get the item gets relisted again. Same seller. I know it's the same seller because the wording that was used and the pictures that were used were exactly the same as the last two times. But this time it says due to time wasters. Well, Mr. from Halifax, I hope that's not referring to me because I've been very square and straight with my maximum bid each time. So I don't know who these time wasters are. But the fact that I was outbid immediately every time I put a bid in tells me something is not quite right, or I feel there's something not quite right. This time the listing started at £150. 2-day listing as before. My spidery senses are starting to tingle at this point. So I guess what? I put in a bid of £150. And guess what? I was once again immediately outbid. Another £10 went on top. It was £150 and it went to £160. Was I surprised? No. By this point I was kind of expecting that. So why are my spidery senses tingling at this point? Well, first, if you look at the other items this seller is selling or has sold, they are not instruments and specifically not keyboards. 2, their behaviour. An auction is an auction. If you win an auction, you should win the item, unless you've put a reserve in place. Now, eBay and I think Reverb do allow you to put reserves in place in terms of how you buy something. They do allow you to do that, and they also tell the people bidding on those items that there is a reserve and the reserve has not been met. So you can control how much money you want for that particular item. You can say I'll start at £150, but actually I want £400 for it. And you can put a reserve in. Now, if you do put a reserve in, people know that you haven't hit that reserve, and they can keep up bidding until all of a sudden it says reserve cleared. Tells the people. The problem with putting a reserve in, of course, is I can't remember what Reverb do for it, but definitely eBay, they will charge you more money for the listing fees. So normally you can list free on eBay unless you put reserves or buy it nows or some other thing on the listing, and then they start charging you money for it. So it's not a lot of money if you think about it in the grand scheme of things, but they do charge you for it. The third is the fact that this guy, girl, whoever it was trying to negotiate with me around the platform. Now that always starts the spidery senses tingling, because they were trying to do negotiations, but they weren't trying to do negotiations against the item that had been sold. They were trying to do negotiations against a sales listing that I had on eBay. So they looked at my user account, saw something that was listed, and they were trying to negotiate with me over that sales item, not their sales item. Now, this is a problem because what eBay do is eBay monitor any correspondence that goes backwards and forwards between users on a sales item, specifically if there is a dispute or for some reason somebody cancels the bid and then tries to effectively do it round the side, i.e. they turn around and say, oh, can you go onto WhatsApp and talk to me there, or can you do this or the other, and all of a sudden the transaction gets cancelled. That flags up to eBay because they think that somebody is effectively trying to say, well, if you give me 400 quid cash, then we won't go through the platform. And I've seen people do that beforehand and then get themselves effectively banned from eBay. But the fact they were doing it on my sales listing, not on their sales listing, really started the old spidery senses tingling. So what am I thinking about this? I have no proof. This is all speculation. Right? I want to make that very clear. No proof about anything I'm about to say. It's all pure speculation. The keyboard might not be as described. The word immaculate is used several times in the description. And you've got to think, well, if it's immaculate, are these stock photos of a immaculate synth, or are these photos of the actual synth? Don't quite know. The keyboard is being sold on behalf of somebody else who has been promised a specific amount of money. That's very possible. I've seen that happen. I know people who've done that in the past and then realised what they've promised the seller isn't really what they're getting for the keyboard. The seller is just a money-grabbing person that has no understanding of the value of the instrument or the value of the instrument in the hands of a musician. Now, I kind of think this is probably what's going on. They've acquired this synthesizer from somewhere, think they can make a quick buck, and that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to effectively sell it, knock it, and flip it on to make a quick buck. Lastly, it's stolen. Now, eBay, as much as it tries to catch things that are stolen, but the reality is, once it kind of enters the system, it's very hard to track stolen items unless they're quite unique. Now, a keyboard would be a relatively unique thing, but it's still difficult to prove it's stolen, especially if it moves location from the point of wherever it came from to the point of wherever it's listed from to the point of wherever it ends up. Although I don't really think this is the case in this particular instance, because the account does have other listings, and you would be a complete idiot to try and sell stolen stuff through an account that you're trying to sell other things through. So I don't think that was the case, but it is a possibility. And as I record this today, Sunday, this morning, this synth was relisted on eBay with a starting bid of £450. Well, guys, happy bidding for this synth. Well, I can honestly say it's been a very interesting week, in one way or another. Yes, I did not win the DX7 Mark II FD from this eBay seller in Halifax. And, am I a bit annoyed about it? I'm a bit miffed that I've been kind of led up the garden path several times on this particular item from this seller on eBay, where I've put in bids of good faith. But I'm not actually upset about it. Why? Well, it's very, very interesting, but on Thursday, after the... was it the last one? No, was it Thursday or was it Friday? It might have been Friday, actually. On Friday, I got an email from a contact who said, John, are you still looking for a Yamaha DX7 Mark II FD? To which I responded and saying, yes, I'm bidding on one. I've been bidding on one this week. And they said, we've just had one that's arrived. Are you interested in it? And this is the price. Of course I'm interested in it, and I know the provenance of this particular DX7 Mark II FD, and it all works. because they've tested it, and I've agreed a price with them, and they are shipping it, or they shipped it on Friday. So I'm expecting that to arrive, because the courier company doesn't deliver over the weekend. I'm expecting that to arrive here Monday, Tuesday next week. So it's all kind of worked out for the best, to be honest, because I haven't been mucked around. I don't have to drive to Halifax to pick it up, and I have what I think is a decent, well-maintained machine arriving next week that will fulfill my requirements for a DX7 Mark II. The other side of this, of course, is the fact that I have a number of you guys on the channel who have requested specific videos relating to the DX7 Mark II, which I haven't done purely because of the fact I don't think I've had the Mark II here. In fact, I'm pretty sure I haven't had the Mark II here at all while I've been living here. It's been in storage pretty much the whole time. I will go and get the Mark II, actually, thinking about it, because the battery probably needs to be changed again. And there is some changes I want to make, because when I originally did the battery change on the Mark II, I didn't make a particularly good job of it. So I will need to make those changes. I probably need to put a new battery into this new Mark II that's coming. As I say, I tend to change the battery, and then I mark down when I've changed the battery, and then I do it every 5 years. And my Mark II's been in storage for as long as I've been down here, which is when I moved in here, 2020, wasn't it? I moved in here, so that's 3 years, or coming up to 3 years. So guys, watch out for the channel. There are going to be some DX7 videos turning up on the channel very shortly. I can tell you what 3 of them look like. Actually, no, I tell a lie. I have had the Mark II here. I have had it here because I'm just thinking back to the videos. I have had it here. I've completely forgotten about that. Yes, I have had the Mark II here because I did some work with the DT7 and some work with the CX5M for the DX7. So there are some videos coming. There's a video with the DT7, there's a video with the CX5M, there's obviously going to be a video around cartridge work with the DX7, and there's going to be a video around floppy disk work with the DX7. I'm not quite sure how those last two are going to work out yet. I still need to do some more prep work for those, but those videos are coming. They will be on the channel during the spring of this year, which is 2023. So until then, and I hope you've got something out of this video. Live long and prosper, guys. I will see you guys next time. Bye bye.